It's an enormous pleasure for me to be here today with all of my colleagues to remind Canadians and to remind this government that young people should have a say in the direction that this country is taking in terms of climate change. So the Harper government has to realize that there is a cost to doing nothing. The cost of climate change could reach $5 billion per year in 2020, according to the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy. And these costs are going to be footed, this bill is going to be footed by myself, by my generation, and by the generations to come. So that's why action needs to be taken right now. The Climate Change Accountability Act, sponsored by the NDP, entrenches science-based targets of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions to a level of 80% below that of 1990 by the year 2050, and establishes interim targets between 2015 and 2045. On May 2nd, the NDP elected a record number of young young MPs, many of whom seconded this bill, as my colleague mentioned. So this is why we're here today. And in 1988, the World Conference on Changing Atmosphere took place in Toronto, and this was one of the first efforts to facilitate international political cooperation on climate change. To explain to you why I'm bringing this up now, I'd like to read an excerpt from the opening statement of the conference. So it reads, "Humanity is conducting an unintended, uncontrolled, globally pervasive experiment whose ultimate consequences could be second only to global nuclear war." This was in 1988, so this was 2 years before I was born. The Earth's atmosphere is being changed at an unprecedented rate by pollutants resulting from human activities, inefficient and wasteful fossil fuel use, and the effects of rapid population growth in many regions. These changes represent a major threat to international security and are already having harmful consequences over many parts of the globe. End quote. So this was in 1988, which means that for my entire life, I have been living in a society that is aware that if we do not take immediate action on climate change, we risk facing major environmental disaster. And already we're seeing the effects of climate change on our environment. And as a result of these changes, we have seen and will continue to see effects on our health, effects on food security, and effects on our economy. But unfortunately, the Harper government has earned Canada an international reputation as a laggard on climate change action and has been obstructive at talks. And Canada has earned the dubious distinction of being the only party to the Kyoto Protocol to declare it has no intentions of meeting its commitments. That's completely unacceptable. It is clear that the Harper government's promotion of the development of oil sands is a major reason for its reluctance to rein in emissions. And just yesterday, the National Energy Board reported that the oil sands will triple, they'll triple in size by 2035. So by refusing to enforce strong environmental regulations or cap emissions, this government is allowing these projects to determine Canada's future. The government's action is shameful, and it needs to stop throwing hissy fits during question period and take real action to reduce this country's greenhouse gas emissions. During the upcoming talks, the NDP is calling for 4 things. The first thing is a second round of commitments in Kyoto, or failing that, a fair, ambitious, and binding successor agreement. Secondly, we're calling for an adequate new and additional funding for the Green Climate Fund for 2013 to assist developing countries with adaptation and mitigation. The third thing is we're asking to close a gigaton gap. And fourthly, we're asking for no gap in legally binding commitments.